The crystalline throne room stretched as far as the eye could see. Columns of pure light rose from the floor, twisting into impossible shapes that hurt to look at directly. Ambassador Marcus Webb had seen many wonders since humanity joined the galactic community 50 years ago, but the palace of the Zircon Empire still took his breath away. Today was special. Today, Queen Velshara would officially take her place as ruler of the Celestial Dominion, an empire that had controlled most of the known galaxy for 3,000 years. Marcus stood among representatives from over 100 worlds. To his left, a being made of living crystal hummed softly. To his right, an aquatic creature floated in a containment suit, filled with purple liquid. Behind him, insectoid diplomats clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation. The diversity of life in the galaxy never ceased to amaze him. "She comes," someone whispered in galactic standard, the common language that all species used for diplomacy. The massive doors at the far end of the throne room began to open. They moved silently despite being carved from solid starstone, a material harder than diamond. Golden light poured through the opening, growing brighter and brighter until Marcus had to squint. Queen Velshara entered. She was magnificent. The Zircon were tall, elegant beings who seemed to be made of condensed starlight. Velshara stood nearly 8 feet tall, her form shifting between solid and energy. She wore robes that appeared to be woven from the fabric of space itself, displaying distant galaxies and nebulae across their surface. 6 luminous eyes, 3 on each side of her elongated head, swept across the assembled crowd. Around her floated her attendants, beings of pure energy who could manipulate reality itself. They were the royal guard, and they had never failed to protect a Zircon monarch. As the queen moved forward, walking on air itself, something happened that Marcus had been warned about. Everyone knelt, the crystalline being dropped to one knee with a sound like wind chimes. The aquatic creature's suit lowered to the ground. The insectoids pressed their bodies flat. Across the entire throne room, hundreds of representatives from hundreds of worlds assumed positions of submission according to their species' customs. Everyone except Marcus Webb. He remained standing, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind his back in a military rest position. His dark suit looked simple compared to the elaborate garments around him, but he wore it with quiet dignity. The silence that followed was absolute. Queen Velshara stopped moving, her 6 eyes fixed on Marcus, and he felt the weight of her gaze like physical pressure against his chest. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Ice crystals began forming on the nearest columns. When she spoke, her voice didn't come from her mouth. It resonated directly in the minds of everyone present, a form of telepathic communication the Zircon had perfected millions of years ago. Human. The word carried disappointment and anger. "You dare disrespect traditions spanning eons?" Marcus took a breath and responded in clear galactic standard, speaking aloud so everyone could hear. "With respect, Your Majesty, humans bow to no one. We can show honor without submission." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several diplomats turned to stare at Marcus with expressions of shock, fear, or in a few cases barely hidden approval. One of the Queen's energy attendants moved toward Marcus, ready to force him down. But Velshara raised one elegant hand, stopping the guard. "Explain yourself, human," she said, her mental voice cold enough to freeze stars. "The ceremony of ascension has been performed the same way for 3 millennia. Every species that enters this room shows proper respect to the celestial throne. Why do you believe your kind is exempt?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Because humanity joined the galactic community as equals, not as subjects. I've studied every treaty, every agreement, every accord that Earth signed when we made first contact. Nowhere in any of those documents did we agree to kneel before anyone." "Treaties?" Velshara descended until she stood on the actual floor, moving closer to Marcus. Even then, she towered over him. "Treaties are words on documents. This is tradition. This is order. This is how civilization functions in this galaxy." "Perhaps," Marcus replied calmly, "but it's not how humanity functions. We've learned through hard experience that the moment you kneel, you accept that someone is above you. We prefer to stand and look each other in the eye as equals. The Queen's energy form flickered, showing her agitation. You speak of equality, yet you are barely more than children in galactic terms. Your species has only had faster-than-light travel for half a century. The Zircon were crossing the stars when your planet was still covered in ice. Age doesn't determine worth, Marcus said. And experience doesn't grant the right to demand submission. Your Majesty, I mean no disrespect to you personally or to your people. But I'm here as a representative of humanity, and I must represent our values honestly. We show respect through our actions, our words, and our cooperation, not by kneeling. A Zircon noble near the throne, his robes decorated with military insignias, stepped forward. Your Majesty, this insolence cannot stand. If we allow one species to ignore our customs, others will follow. The order of the Dominion will collapse. Murmurs of agreement rippled through some sections of the crowd. But Marcus noticed others remaining silent, watching with interest. Queen Velshara studied Marcus for a long moment. Her 6 eyes seemed to pierce through him, reading every thought and feeling. Finally, she spoke again. You claim to respect me, Ambassador Webb, yet you refuse the most basic gesture of that respect. You claim humanity deserves to stand equal with the Zircon, yet you provide no evidence of this worth. Her form brightened, filling the room with harsh light. Your defiance has insulted not only me, but the cosmic order itself. 3,000 years of civilization, and a species that has barely left its home system dares to challenge it. Marcus remained calm, though he could feel sweat forming on his back. I challenge nothing, Your Majesty. I simply ask that humanity be judged by its actions, not by whether we perform certain ceremonies. Very well, Velshara said, and her tone made everyone in the room tense. I will give you 3 cycles, 3 of your Earth days, to reconsider your position. During this time, you will remain here in the palace as my guest. You may use this time to study our history, to understand what you so carelessly reject. She moved closer, until she was directly in front of Marcus, looking down at him with all 6 eyes blazing. At the end of 3 days, Ambassador Marcus Webb, you will make a choice. Either you will kneel before this throne and humanity will formally accept its place within the natural order of the Dominion as a protectorate under our guidance, or you will demonstrate why your species deserves to stand equal with those who have ruled the stars for millennia. The Queen's attendants surrounded Marcus, forming a cage of light. Choose wisely, human. Many species have defied the Zircon in the past. All of them learned why we have remained supreme for 3,000 years. I would hate for humanity to learn that lesson the hard way. Also, 45. With that, Queen Velshara turned and ascended to her throne. The coronation ceremony continued. But every being in that vast room was thinking about the same thing, the human who refused to kneel, and what would happen when the 3 days ended. Marcus Webb's quarters were beautiful and terrible at the same time. The rooms were vast, with walls that showed peaceful Earth landscapes, rolling green hills, blue oceans, and golden sunsets. Soft music played from invisible sources. A table held foods from dozens of worlds, including several dishes from Earth, but the door wouldn't open. The windows were solid energy fields, and 2 Zircon guards stood outside, their forms glowing with barely contained power. A prison dressed as paradise. Marcus sat at the desk and began reviewing files on his handheld device. If he only had 3 days, he would use them wisely. He pulled up every document he could find about Zircon history, their customs, and the species that had challenged them before. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Every species that refused to submit had eventually been forced to accept protectorate status, a polite term for losing their independence. Some had been economically pressured, others had faced military demonstrations. None had remained free. Still studying, Ambassador? Marcus turned quickly. Queen Velshara stood in his room, though he hadn't heard her enter. She must have passed through the walls themselves. Your Majesty. Marcus stood but didn't bow. I didn't expect a personal visit. Most wouldn't dare expect anything from me, Velshara replied, moving closer. Her 6 eyes studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Yet you continue to surprise me." Marcus Webb. "Most beings would spend these 3 days panicking or planning escape. You read history books. Knowledge is humanity's greatest weapon," Marcus said simply. The Queen tilted her head, an oddly human gesture. "Weapon? An interesting choice of words. Do you see us as enemies then? I see you as a potential friend or a potential threat." "Which one depends on what happens in 3 days." Velshara made a sound that might have been laughter. "You're either very brave or very foolish. I haven't decided which." She moved to the window, looking out at the false Earth scenery. "Tell me, Ambassador, why is standing so important to your kind? Why risk everything for mere symbolism?" Marcus joined her at the window, careful to maintain respectful distance. "It's not just symbolism. In human history, every time people were forced to kneel, it started with a simple gesture and ended with chains. We've been conquered before, enslaved, oppressed. We learned that freedom must be defended from the first moment, or it slips away one small surrender at a time." "Interesting," the Queen mused. "The Zircon have never been conquered. Perhaps that's why we don't understand your fear. It's not fear. It's wisdom bought with suffering." Velshara turned to face him fully. "I came here to offer you something, Marcus Webb. A way to prove your conviction, or reveal it as empty pride." "I'm listening." "The trial of worth," she said. "An ancient Zircon tradition. Rarely used. If a species believes they deserve equal standing with us, they may attempt the trial. It consists of 3 challenges: testing wisdom, strength, and spirit. Pass all 3, and I will grant humanity the equality you demand. Fail even one." She let the sentence hang. "And if I fail, then humanity accepts protectorate status. You will kneel, Ambassador Webb, and your species will acknowledge that they're not yet ready to walk among the stars as equals." Marcus thought carefully. "What happens if I refuse the trial?" "The same outcome as failure. I gave you 3 days to reconsider. This is your reconsideration, a chance to prove your words with actions." Her eyes glowed brighter. "Or are humans only brave with speeches?" Marcus felt the challenge in her words. This was a test in itself. Would he risk everything on his convictions, or would he retreat to safety? "I accept the trial of worth," he said firmly. Velshara's expression shifted into something almost like satisfaction. "Good. The first challenge begins now. Follow me." She turned and walked through the wall. Marcus hesitated, then saw a normal door open where solid energy had been moments before. The guard stepped aside, and he followed the Queen into the corridor. They walked through the palace, passing rooms filled with wonders. One chamber held a miniature galaxy rotating slowly in the air. Another contained what appeared to be living statues that turned their heads to watch them pass. Eventually, they reached a massive set of doors carved with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. "The Archive of Conquered Worlds," Velshara announced as the doors opened. Inside was a library beyond imagination. Shelves stretched upward into darkness, filled with data crystals, holographic displays, and storage devices from 1,000 different civilizations. The air hummed with stored information. "This archive contains the complete history of every species the Zircon have defeated, absorbed, or guided into our empire," the Queen explained. "Your challenge is this. Study the records of 12 specific civilizations I will designate. By this time tomorrow, tell me what single common factor led to their fall. Find the true answer, and you pass. Give me a false or incomplete answer, and you fail." She gestured, and 12 holographic displays lit up around the room, each showing a different alien species. Some looked humanoid. Others were bizarre beyond description. "These are the Volath, the Cretan, the Mendari." Velshara named them all. 12 species who were once mighty, 12 who are now either extinct or so diminished they barely matter. One pattern connects them all. Find it. Marcus looked at the overwhelming amount of information. Thousands of years of history across 12 different civilizations. He had less than 24 hours. You may use any resource in this archive, Velshara added. But you may not contact anyone outside this room. No help from Earth, no consultation with other species. Just you, Ambassador, and the lessons of history. Understood, Marcus said, already moving toward the first display. One more thing, the Queen said from the doorway. 7 other species have attempted this trial over the centuries. All 7 failed this first challenge. The pattern is not obvious, and most look for military or technological answers. I suggest you think more deeply. With that, she left, and the doors sealed behind her. Marcus stood alone in the archive of conquered worlds, surrounded by the ghosts of fallen civilizations. He rolled up his sleeves and began to read. Outside the archive, Velshara stood in the corridor. One of her advisors approached, an elderly Zircon named Torvas, who had served her father. Your Majesty, he said quietly. Why give the human this chance? We could simply force his compliance. Velshara watched the sealed doors thoughtfully. Because, old friend, something about him troubles me. He stands not from arrogance, but from principle. I want to understand why, and perhaps... She paused. Perhaps I want to see if he can find the answer that has haunted me since I took this throne. What answer? Whether dominion is the same as leadership, she said softly. Whether being feared is the same as being respected. Whether an empire built on submission can truly last forever. She turned away, her robes shifting like galaxies in motion. The human thinks he's on trial. He doesn't realize that the Zircon Empire itself is being tested. If he succeeds, everything might change. If he fails, everything remains the same. And which outcome do you want? Your Majesty? Queen Velshara didn't answer. She simply walked away, leaving the question hanging in the air like smoke. Inside the archive, Marcus worked through the night, his human eyes reading by the light of dead civilizations, searching for a truth that might save his species or doom them forever. The first challenge had begun. Marcus had been reading for 16 hours straight. His eyes burned, his back ached, and his mind felt stuffed with information. Empty food containers from the palace staff sat beside him. They brought meals without him asking, then disappeared like ghosts. The holographic displays floated around him, each showing a different civilization's rise and fall. The Veloth had been master engineers, who built structures that touched the edges of space. The Cretan had developed weapons that could crack planets. The Mendari had mastered genetics, creating new forms of life. All of them were gone, or reduced to shadows of their former glory. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes and looked at his notes. He had filled dozens of pages with observations, timelines, and theories. At first, he thought the pattern was military. Each civilization had been defeated in war by the Zircon. But that was too simple. 7 others had tried this challenge and failed with that answer. He dug deeper into the economic records. Maybe they had been financially dependent on the Zircon? But no. Several civilizations had been completely independent when they fell. Technology? The Zircon were advanced, but not impossibly so. These civilizations had possessed powerful technologies of their own. Marcus stood and paced between the displays, his mind racing. There had to be something he was missing, some thread connecting all 12 stories. He stopped at the display showing the Veloth. According to the records, they had been the first to establish formal relations with the Zircon. They had signed treaties, exchanged technologies, and gradually integrated their military forces with Zircon command structures for mutual defense. Within 200 years, the Veloth had no independent government. They had become another province of the Celestial Dominion. Marcus moved to the Cretan display. Different species, different technology, different part of the galaxy. But the story was eerily similar. They had accepted Zircon advisors to help modernize their society. Those advisors had slowly taken over decision-making. Eventually, the Cretan were asking permission for everything. The pattern began to emerge like a picture coming into focus. Marcus worked faster now, checking each civilization. The Mindari had accepted Zircon protection from a neighboring threat. The Sylar had joined a mutual defense pact. The Thornay had agreed to standardize their laws with Zircon codes for easier trade. Different doors, but all leading to the same room. Each civilization had given up small pieces of their independence, thinking they were making practical choices. Each time, they told themselves it was just cooperation, just mutual benefit. But piece by piece, decision by decision, they had surrendered their ability to govern themselves. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. Marcus sat down heavily, the weight of understanding settling on him. This wasn't about military conquest or technological superiority. It was far more subtle and far more effective. The Zircon had perfected the art of making subjugation feel like partnership. The doors to the archive opened. Queen Velshara entered, her form bright in the dim light. Behind her came several members of her court, including the military noble who had spoken against Marcus during the coronation. "Time is up, Ambassador Webb," the Queen announced. "Present your answer." Marcus stood, straightening his rumpled suit. He was aware of how he must look exhausted, disheveled, small compared to the towering Zircon, but he stood straight and met the Queen's 6 eyes with confidence. "I've found the pattern, Your Majesty." "Speak then. What single factor connects the fall of these 12 civilizations?" Marcus took a breath. They surrendered their autonomy willingly. Not through military defeat, but through 1,000 small agreements that seemed reasonable at the time. They accepted help, guidance, protection, and standardization. Each decision made sense individually, but together, they gave up their ability to solve their own problems, make their own mistakes, and chart their own future. The court members murmured among themselves. The military noble's expression darkened. "Continue," Velshara said, her voice neutral. "The Zircon didn't conquer these civilizations, not really. You offered them something appealing. Stability, protection, access to greater technology and knowledge. Who would refuse such gifts? But gifts create debt, and debt creates dependence. Eventually, these species stopped being partners and became clients. Then subjects. Then footnotes in your archive." Marcus gestured at the displays around him. Each of these civilizations was mighty in their own right. They could have remained independent powers, but they chose the easy path. Let someone else solve the hard problems, make the difficult decisions, take the risks, and in doing so, they lost the very qualities that made them great in the first place. Their innovative spirit died because they stopped needing to innovate. Their strength faded because they stopped exercising it. The Queen moved closer, her energy form crackling slightly. "You suggest the Zircon deliberately destroyed these civilizations through kindness?" "Not destroyed, absorbed. And I don't know if it was deliberate or just the natural result of an empire that believes it should guide everyone else." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "But the result is the same. 12 mighty civilizations reduced to dependencies. Their unique voices silenced. Their potential wasted. Insolent." The military noble burst out. "Your Majesty, this human accuses us of..." "Silence." Velshara's command cut through the air like a blade. She studied Marcus for a long moment, her 6 eyes unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "You have passed the first challenge, Ambassador Webb." Relief flooded through Marcus, though he kept his expression neutral. "Your answer is correct," the Queen continued, "and disturbing. You are only the second being in our history to identify this pattern. The first was my father, 300 years ago. He spent the rest of his life trying to reform the empire." She paused. "He failed." The courtiers shifted uncomfortably at this revelation. "But understanding is not the same as wisdom," Velshara said. "You claim humanity should remain independent to preserve your innovative spirit and strength. Very well. The second challenge will test whether that strength is real or merely another form of pride." She gestured, and the archive displays vanished. In their place, a holographic image appeared, a massive arena surrounded by thousands of seats. "The Arena of Titans," the Queen announced. "Tomorrow at midday, you will face Champion Kravok in single combat. He has defended Zircon honor in this arena for 50 years and has never been defeated. He has killed beings 3 times your size and defeated warriors with centuries of training. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice steady. And if I defeat him? Then you pass the second challenge. Velshara's expression was impossible to read. You may choose any weapon from the Royal Armory energy swords that can cut through starship hulls, plasma rifles that can vaporize mountains, shields that can deflect nuclear blasts. We have weapons that have toppled armies and ended wars. She leaned closer. Choose wisely, human. Kravok will not show mercy, simply because you are small and weak. In the arena, there are only 2 outcomes: victory or death. Marcus swallowed hard but didn't look away. I understand. Good. Return to your quarters and rest. You have 18 hours to prepare. The Queen turned to leave, then paused. Ambassador Webb, I am curious. Do you truly believe you can defeat our champion? Marcus thought about all the human history he had studied, the countless times his species had faced impossible odds. David versus Goliath. The Battle of Thermopylae. The resistance fighters who defeated empires with nothing but courage and cleverness. I believe, he said carefully, that humans have a long history of surviving things that should have killed us. We're very good at being underestimated. Queen Velshara's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. Then I look forward to seeing if your species' reputation is deserved. Sleep well. Ambassador, tomorrow, the galaxy will watch you fight for humanity's right to stand equal. She left with her entourage, and Marcus was alone again. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. He was a diplomat, not a warrior. He had basic self-defense training, but nothing that could prepare him to fight a champion who had never lost. But he had no choice. If he refused, humanity would kneel. If he fought and lost, humanity would kneel. The only option was to win. Marcus left the archive and walked back to his quarters, his mind already working on the problem. He couldn't match Kravok's strength or experience. He would have to find another way. Humanity always did. The Arena of Titans was even more impressive in person than in the holographic display. Marcus stood at the entrance, looking up at the massive structure that seemed to reach into the clouds. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds filled the seats, their voices creating a sound like thunder. Word had spread across the galaxy. The human who refused to kneel would fight for his species' freedom. A Zircon attendant approached Marcus, gesturing toward a large armory room. Ambassador Webb, you must now choose your weapon. The Queen has granted you access to the entire royal collection. Marcus entered the armory and stopped, overwhelmed. Weapons lined every wall, each one more terrifying than the last. Energy swords hummed with barely contained power. Plasma rifles gleamed with deadly purpose. He saw shields that created force fields, armor that could withstand missile strikes, and devices whose purpose he couldn't even guess. Any of these weapons could kill him as easily as protect him if he didn't know how to use them properly. Marcus walked past all of them and stopped at a simple wooden staff leaning in the corner. It was plain, undecorated, about 6 feet long. It looked almost like a joke compared to the advanced weapons surrounding it. This one, Marcus said, picking up the staff. The attendant stared at him in confusion. Ambassador, that is merely a practice weapon. It has no power source, no energy field. No, it's perfect, Marcus interrupted. I'll also need to see the arena layout and any recordings of Champion Kravok's previous fights. The attendant hesitated, then bowed. As you wish. For the next 2 hours, Marcus studied. He watched Kravok fight 17 different opponents. The champion was a massive being, 12 feet tall, covered in natural bio-armor that had evolved over millions of years. His species, the Chromath, were bred for war. Kravok's arms could crush steel, and energy weapons were built into his body. But Marcus noticed something. Every opponent had tried to match Kravok's strength. Everyone had brought the most powerful weapons they could find. And everyone had lost, because they played Kravok's game. Marcus smiled slightly. He wouldn't make that mistake. The announcement echoed through the arena. The trial begins. Marcus walked out into the center of the arena, staff in hand. The crowd's noise was deafening. Some cheered, caught up in the spectacle. Others laughed, thinking this was a joke. A human with a stick against the undefeated champion? Queen Velshera sat in the royal box, surrounded by her court. Her 6 eyes were fixed on Marcus. From the opposite entrance, champion Kravok emerged. He was terrifying, massive, covered in dark armor that looked like it was part of his body, with 4 arms ending in claws that could tear through metal. His face was brutal and scarred from countless battles. Energy weapons built into his forearms glowed with deadly light. The crowd roared their approval. This was their champion, their protector, their pride. Kravok looked at Marcus and laughed a deep, rumbling sound. Human, I respect your courage. But courage will not save you. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick. Marcus planted his staff and bowed respectfully. I cannot surrender, champion. Too much depends on this fight. So be it. The signal sounded. The fight began. Kravok immediately charged, firing energy bolts from his arm weapons. Marcus was already moving, rolling to the side as the arena floor exploded where he had been standing. The champion was fast for his size, but Marcus was faster. Marcus ran, not away, but in a pattern. He had studied the arena carefully. Its floor was designed to shift and change, creating different terrain for different fights. He had noticed the control panels built into the walls. Kravok roared and charged again, his 4 arms reaching to grab Marcus. The human ducked under the grab and struck with his staff, not at Kravok, but at a control panel on the wall. The arena floor suddenly tilted, throwing both fighters off balance. Kravok, heavy and massive, stumbled. Marcus used his staff to vault over the champion, landing behind him. The crowd gasped. Was the human running away? No, he was thinking. Kravok fired more energy bolts, tracking Marcus across the arena. But Marcus was using the environment. He triggered another control panel, and walls rose from the floor, creating obstacles. The champion's energy bolts hit the walls instead of their target. Stop running, coward, Kravok bellowed. I'm not running, Marcus called back. I'm learning, and he was. Every time Kravok attacked, Marcus observed. The champion's energy weapons needed 3 seconds to recharge between shots. His 4 arms were powerful but slower to coordinate than 2 arms. His massive weight made quick direction changes difficult. Marcus had no chance of overpowering Kravok. But he didn't need to. He needed to outsmart him. The fight continued, and the crowd grew quieter. They were beginning to realize this wasn't the quick execution they expected. The human was holding his own, not through strength, but through cleverness. Queen Velshera leaned forward in her seat, fascinated. Marcus triggered more arena controls, changing the gravity in sections of the floor. Kravok found himself suddenly fighting against increased weight in some areas, and nearly floating in others. The champion was growing frustrated, his attacks becoming less controlled, more desperate. This was what Marcus had been waiting for. He led Kravok into a specific section of the arena, using his staff to vault and dodge, always staying just out of reach. The champion followed, roaring with anger, determined to crush this annoying human. Then Marcus triggered one final control panel. The section of arena where Kravok stood suddenly became a zero-gravity zone. The massive champion, with all his weight and power, found himself floating helplessly in the air, unable to push off anything for leverage. Marcus remained on solid ground at the edge of the zone, breathing hard but standing firm. Do you yield, champion? Marcus called out. Kravok struggled in the air, firing his energy weapons wildly. But Marcus simply stepped back, letting the bolts fly harmlessly past him. The crowd was silent now, watching in disbelief. You cannot win this way, Kravok shouted. The gravity will normalize eventually. Then I will crush you. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But I don't need to defeat you through strength, champion. I just need you to understand something. He pointed his staff at Kravok. Power isn't everything. The strongest doesn't always win. Sometimes the smartest does. Sometimes the most adaptable does. This is why humanity refuses to kneel, because we've learned that survival isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being willing to think differently, to adapt, to find solutions others can't see. Marcus walked closer to the floating champion. You're a great warrior, Kravok. But you've only ever fought one way. You've only ever used your strength. What happens when you face a problem strength can't solve? The gravity began to normalize. Kravok's feet touched the ground again. He could attack now, could kill Marcus with one strike, but he didn't. The champion looked at the human standing before him with nothing but a wooden stick. Marcus had defeated him without landing a single blow. He had turned Kravok's strength into weakness, had made the arena itself his weapon. Slowly, Champion Kravok lowered his arms. I yield, he said quietly. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in anger, others in amazement. The noise was overwhelming. Queen Velshera stood in her royal box, her 6 eyes glowing brightly. She raised one hand, and silence fell across the arena. Ambassador Marcus Webb has passed the second challenge, she announced. He has proven that humanity possesses not just words, but wisdom. Not just courage, but capability. She descended from the royal box, floating down to the arena floor. She approached Marcus, who stood exhausted but unbowed. You have done what many thought impossible, she said. But one challenge remains. The test of spirit. And this one, Ambassador Webb, will be the hardest of all. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, alarms blared across the arena. The sky above turned red. A Zircon military officer rushed into the royal box, his form flickering with panic. Your Majesty, the Devourer fleet has breached our outer defenses. They're heading toward the capital. The crowd began to panic. The Devourers, enemies from before recorded history, thought destroyed millennia ago. They had returned. The palace war room filled with panicked voices. Holographic displays showed the Devourer fleet, massive biomechanical ships that looked like living nightmares. They consumed everything in their path, matter, energy, even information itself. What they devoured made them stronger. Marcus stood in the corner, still exhausted from his fight with Kravok. Queen Velshara had brought him here directly from the arena. Though many of her military advisors protested having a human present during their crisis. Deploy the 7th Fleet to intercept, Admiral Tormine commanded, his form crackling with agitated energy. The 7th Fleet is already engaged, Admiral, another officer reported. They're losing. The Devourers are adapting to our weapons faster than before. Marcus watched the tactical displays carefully. The Zircon were fighting exactly as they had for 3,000 years, with overwhelming force and superior firepower. Their ships were magnificent, their weapons devastating. But every attack the Devourers absorbed made them stronger. Activate the ancient weapons, Tormund ordered. Use the planet crackers if necessary. Admiral, those weapons haven't been tested in centuries. Do it. Queen Velshera stood at the center of the room, her 6 eyes tracking multiple displays at once. She looked calm, but Marcus could see the tension in her form. Her empire was being torn apart, and her military was falling back on the same strategies that were clearly failing. Marcus made a decision. He stepped forward. Your Majesty, if I may. Silence, human, Tormund snapped. This is no time for diplomacy. Admiral Tormund is correct, another advisor added. We should remove the human from this room immediately. These are matters of imperial security. But Velshera raised one hand, and silence fell. She looked at Marcus, and in her eyes, he saw something unexpected: hope, or perhaps desperation. Speak, Ambassador Webb, she said quietly. Marcus approached the main tactical display. You're fighting them wrong. You're using power against an enemy that feeds on power. Every weapon you fire, every energy blast, they consume it and grow stronger. You're literally feeding them. What would you suggest? Tormund asked, sarcastically. That we surrender? No, Marcus said firmly. I suggest you fight smarter, not harder. This is what humans do best. We adapt when our first approach fails. He pointed at the display showing the Devourer formations. Look at their pattern. They move as a coordinated group, sharing information across their entire fleet. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. Overload their communication network with contradictory information, and you disrupt their coordination. Impossible, an officer scoffed. Their systems are too advanced to hack. I'm not talking about hacking. I'm talking about confusion. Marcus traced patterns on the display. Deploy false targets, ships programmed to look important, but containing nothing valuable. Make them waste energy chasing ghosts. Use weapons designed not to destroy, but to confuse their sensors. Feed them poisoned data. Velshara studied the plan, her mind working quickly. Asymmetric warfare. You're suggesting we fight like a weaker force against a stronger one. Exactly. Because right now, you are the weaker force. Your traditional approach isn't working. Pride won't save your empire. Your Majesty. Adaptation will. Tormund began to protest, but Velshara cut him off. Implement the human strategy. Immediately. Your Majesty, this is an order, Admiral. We've lost 3 fleets following our traditional approach. If the humans' plan fails, we're no worse off than we are now. But if it succeeds, she looked at Marcus, we might learn something valuable. The next hours were chaos of a different kind. Marcus worked with Zircon tactical officers, translating human military history into galactic warfare. They deployed drone ships, programmed with erratic behavior. They used weapons that released electromagnetic pulses designed to scramble sensors rather than destroy. They fed the Devourer's data designed to look valuable but containing logical paradoxes that would confuse their processing systems. It was messy. It was unconventional. It was nothing like the elegant Zircon way of war. And it was working. The Devourer fleet's advance slowed. Their perfect coordination began to break down as different sections received contradictory information. They started making mistakes, attacking empty space or wasting energy on false targets. It's working, an officer reported, unable to hide his surprise. The Devourers are confused. Their formation is fragmenting. But then the displays flashed red. Your Majesty, the Devourers have adapted. They're ignoring our false signals and converging on a single target. The image showed Queen Velshara's personal flagship, the Celestial Crown, cut off from the rest of the fleet and surrounded by enemy ships. They've identified you as the command center, Marcus said urgently. They're going to destroy your flagship to break our coordination. Velshara's form flickered. Then I will fight them to my last breath. It's the Zircon way. There's another way, Marcus said quickly. He pulled up a file on his device. Experimental human technology that most species considered too dangerous. We've been developing quantum displacement drives. They create temporary rifts in space. Most of the galaxy banned them because they're unpredictable. But they could save my ship. Velshara finished. I can use my ship as a battering ram, Marcus explained. Create a rift right in front of your position. When I say jump, you jump through it. The rift will collapse on the Devourer fleet when they try to follow. They've consumed so much energy that the backlash should overload their systems. Should? Tormund demanded. You're suggesting the Queen risk her life on should? Marcus met Velshara's eyes. I'm suggesting she trust me. Like I trusted your justice system by accepting these trials. Like I trusted Kravok's honor in the arena. Trust goes both ways, Your Majesty. Velshara was silent for a long moment. Outside the war room, her empire hung in the balance. The safe choice was to follow tradition. Fight to the end, the Zircon way. The risky choice was to trust a human she had known for only days. Do it, she said. Marcus ran to the hangar where his small diplomatic ship waited. Within minutes, he was in space, pushing the experimental drive to its limits. The quantum rift tore open in front of Velshara's flagship. A swirling tunnel through space itself. Now, Your Majesty, jump now. The Celestial Crown leaped through the rift just as the Devourer fleet converged. They tried to follow, but Marcus collapsed the rift. The backlash caught them at point-blank range. They had consumed so much energy that it backfired catastrophically. Ships exploded in cascades of released power. The Devourer fleet was destroyed, but Marcus's ship was caught in the blast. Systems failed. Alarms screamed. He was drifting. Life support failing. Then Velshara's voice came through his communications. "Hold on, Ambassador. We're coming for you." When Marcus woke, he was in the palace medical bay. Queen Velshara stood beside his bed, along with Champion Kravok, and many of the court members who had doubted him. "You saved my life," Velshara said simply. "You saved my empire." Marcus sat up slowly, his body aching. "I just did what needed to be done." No, the queen said. She did something then that shocked everyone in the room. She bowed to Marcus, not a small nod, but a full, respectful bow, equal to equal. "For 3,000 years, the Zircon have ruled through the assumption of superiority," she announced. "Today, I learned that true strength comes not from dominance, but from cooperation, not from forcing others to kneel, but from standing together as equals." She straightened and addressed her court. "I hereby abolish the mandatory submission protocols. No species will be required to kneel before this throne. The celestial dominion will transform from an empire into a commonwealth of equals." There were gasps and protests, but Velshara's voice cut through them all. "Ambassador Marcus Webb has passed all 3 trials, not through the challenges I planned, but through actions that proved humanity's worth beyond any test. Wisdom in the archive, cleverness in the arena, and courage in battle. Humanity has earned equal standing." She extended her hand to Marcus, a human gesture. "Will humanity accept formal alliance with the Zircon? Not as subjects, not as protectors, but as partners?" Marcus took her hand and shook it firmly. "We accept, Your Majesty, as equals." Later, Marcus and Velshara stood on the palace balcony, watching ships from hundreds of worlds arrive. News of the changes had spread quickly. Some species were excited, others were uncertain, but all were watching. "You changed everything," Velshara said quietly. "My empire will never be the same." "Change isn't always bad," Marcus replied. "Sometimes standing still is the most dangerous thing you can do." "Why did you refuse to kneel, truly?" she asked. "You could have died. Your species could have been subjugated." Marcus looked out at the stars. "Because sometimes the right thing to do is hard, and humans have never run from hard things. We've learned that freedom must be defended from the first moment, or it slips away. That's why I stayed standing." Velshara smiled, a rare expression. "And in staying standing, you taught us all to rise." "Thank you, Marcus Webb. Thank you for being willing to learn, Your Majesty." They stood together as equals, watching a new age begin. An age where no one would be forced to kneel. An age where different species could stand side by side, each bringing their unique strengths to face whatever challenges the galaxy would bring. It had started with one human who refused to kneel, and it would change the galaxy forever. The end.